Hey there, and welcome to Crazy Pepper, the channel where drama sizzles and revenge burns hotter than ever. If you love jaw dropping twists, bold characters, and stories that keep you guessing till the end, you're in the right place. Subscribe and dive into gripping tales of betrayal, karma, and ultimate payback. Get ready for unforgettable moments and satisfying endings, only on Crazy Pepper. Hit that bell and let the drama begin. The champagne was perfect. Crisp, cold, and expensive enough to make me forget that I've been working 80-hour weeks for the past 3 years without a real vacation. Paris in October was everything the travel blogs promised. Golden leaves, sidewalk cafes, and the kind of sophisticated atmosphere that made you feel like you were living in a movie. I was sitting at the bar of the Hotel Le Bristol, watching the sunset over the Place Vendôme, when my phone rang. The caller ID made me wince. Chaz Driscoll, CEO. My father-in-law. On my first approved vacation in 6 years. Jamie here, I answered, trying to keep the irritation out of my voice. What do you think you're doing? Chaz's voice exploded through the phone so loud that the bartender looked up from polishing glasses. You're fired. We don't need a lazy pig. I laughed and hung up before he could finish his sentence. The audacity was almost admirable. Fire me while I'm on an approved vacation? The man had balls, I'd give him that. Rough day at the office? Asked the guy sitting next to me at the bar. He was tall, well-dressed, with the kind of confident smile that screamed corporate executive. Everything about him, from his perfectly tailored suit to his expensive watch, suggested serious money. You could say that, I replied, raising my glass. Just got fired by my father-in-law for taking a vacation. First one in 6 years, by the way. The stranger extended his hand. Evan Marston, CEO of Titan Logistics, and you are? Jamie Rourke, recently unemployed operations chief at Driscoll & Associates. I shook his hand, noting his firm grip. Wait a minute, Titan Logistics? You guys are our biggest competitor. Evan's smile widened. Small world, isn't it? Well, former competitor, I suppose. What should we toast to? I thought about it for a moment, then raised my glass higher. To unexpected opportunities. We clinked glasses and I downed the rest of my champagne. If Chaz wanted to play hardball, he'd picked the wrong guy. I'd been running operations for his company for 8 years, turning it from a regional player into a serious contender in the logistics industry. I knew every contract, every client relationship, every operational weakness they had. But more importantly, I knew every operational strength, and those were mostly mine. So tell me about Driscoll & Associates, Evan said, signaling the bartender for another round. I've always been curious about how Charles Driscoll built that company. Built it? I laughed. Chaz inherited it from his father and nearly ran it into the ground twice. His daughter Celeste, my wife, handles marketing, but she's more interested in the image than the substance. I've been keeping that place afloat for years. Sounds like they don't appreciate you. Appreciation isn't exactly the Driscoll family strong suit. I paused, studying Evan's face. He was listening intently, like every word mattered. Why the interest? Professional curiosity. We've been watching your company's growth over the past few years. Very impressive operational efficiency. Someone over there knows what they're doing. Well, that someone just got fired for taking a vacation. Evan laughed. Their loss is someone else's gain, right? We talked for another hour about the logistics industry, operational challenges, and the general incompetence of family-run businesses. Evan was sharp, asking the right questions, understanding the technical aspects that most executives glossed over. By the time we parted ways, I was feeling better about my sudden unemployment than I had any right to. The flight back to Portland was long enough for reality to set in. I'd been fired. My wife hadn't returned any of my calls or texts since yesterday, and I was about to walk into what would probably be a very unpleasant conversation about my future with the Driscoll family. I caught a cab from PDX and gave the driver my address, the downtown condo that Celeste and I had bought 3 years ago. It was in her name, of course. Everything was in her name. Better for taxes, she'd said. I'd been too busy keeping her father's company profitable to argue. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt longer than usual. I fumbled with my keys at the door, already planning my defense. The vacation was approved. I had the email. Chaz had signed off on it himself, even if grudgingly. But when I opened the door, I knew immediately that this wasn't about the vacation. The condo was empty. Not just empty of people, empty of Celeste's things. Her clothes, her books, her ridiculous collection of decorative candles, gone. The walls looked naked without her art, and the silence was deafening. I walked through each room, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. In the master bedroom, her side of the closet was completely bare. The bathroom counter, usually cluttered with her skincare products and makeup, was spotless. On the kitchen island, I found a single envelope with my name written in Celeste's precise handwriting. Inside was a key, my office key at Driscoll and Associates, and a brief note, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. C." I tried calling her, straight to voicemail. I tried calling our mutual friends. No answers. I tried calling her sister. "I'm sorry, Jamie, but I can't get involved in this." Involved in what? What the hell was happening? I grabbed a beer from the refrigerator, at least she'd left the beer, and sat down at the kitchen table to think. This wasn't just about the vacation. This was planned, coordinated. While I was sipping champagne in Paris, my wife and her family were systematically removing me from their lives. The question was why. I spent the night in what used to be our bedroom, staring at the ceiling and trying to piece together the last few months. Had there been signs? Changes in Celeste's behavior that I'd missed while buried in quarterly reports and client meetings? The more I thought about it, the more I realized there had been. She'd been distant, distracted. More business trips than usual. Late nights at the office that she'd blamed on campaign planning for their new client acquisition push. And then there were the phone calls. Hushed conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Text messages that made her smile in a way that I hadn't seen directed at me in months. By morning, I had a theory. By noon, I was going to prove it. I drove to the Driscoll and Associates building downtown, a gleaming glass tower that Chaz had bought during one of his more successful periods. The security guard, Tony, had always been friendly with me. "Hey, Mr. Rourke," he said as I approached the front desk. "Back from Paris already? How was it?" "Educational," I replied. "Listen, Tony, I left some personal files on my computer. Mind if I grab them real quick?" He looked uncomfortable. "Actually, Mr. Rourke, I got word yesterday that your access has been revoked. I'm sorry, but I can't let you up." "Revoked? By whom?" "Mr. Driscoll himself. And Mrs. Rourke confirmed it this morning." Mrs. Rourke. My own wife had confirmed my banishment from the building where I'd spent the last 8 years of my life, building something that actually mattered. "I understand," I told Tony, and I meant it. He was just doing his job. "Thanks for letting me know." I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, watching employees come and go. People I'd worked with for years walking past without seeing me. It was like I'd never existed. But I knew something they didn't. Every employee at Driscoll and Associates had access to the shared company server for project files and communication. And Celeste, despite her many talents, had never been particularly careful about digital security. I drove to the public library downtown and used one of their computers to log into the company system. My credentials still worked. Apparently, Chaz's efficiency didn't extend to IT security. I started with Celeste's project folders, looking for anything that might explain the sudden change in my status. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. There was a folder labeled Personal EC that I'd never seen before. Inside were calendar entries, email drafts, and voice memos that painted a picture of my wife that I barely recognized. The calendar entries went back 4 months, regular meetings with EM at various restaurants and hotels around the city. The timing coincided perfectly with her increased business travel. The email drafts were more explicit. Messages to someone called E that detailed not just an affair, but a complete strategy for removing me from both the company and her life. One draft, dated 2 weeks ago, was particularly enlightening. Jamie is completely clueless about what's happening. He's so focused on operations that he doesn't see the bigger picture. Dad thinks we can just fire him and be done with it, but I know him better than that. He'll fight back if he thinks he has a chance. We need to make sure he doesn't have one. The vacation timing is perfect. By the time he gets back, everything will be in place. But it was the voice memo that really got my attention. A message clearly intended for her lover, recorded just 3 days ago. "I can't wait for this to be over. Jamie has been so easy to control for so long that I almost feel bad about it." Almost. But you're right. We can't build something new until we tear down what's old. And what we're building is going to be incredible. Just think about what we can accomplish with both companies working together instead of against each other. Both companies. I sat back in the uncomfortable library chair as the pieces fell into place. Evan Marston, EM, the charming CEO I'd shared drinks with in Paris while my wife was orchestrating my destruction. The man who'd been so interested in Driscoll and Associates' operational efficiency wasn't just a competitor. He was my replacement in every sense of the word. The coincidence of meeting him in Paris hadn't been a coincidence at all. He'd known exactly who I was, exactly what was happening back home, and exactly how to play the sympathetic stranger, while I unknowingly provided him with insider information about my own company. I printed everything I could before my session expired, then sat in my car outside the library, reading through the evidence of my wife's betrayal. It was thorough, calculated, and absolutely ruthless. They hadn't just planned to fire me, they'd planned to destroy any possibility of me landing on my feet. According to the documents, Celeste had already been spreading rumors about my performance issues and attitude problems to key clients and industry contacts. She'd been building a case for my termination that went far beyond the company, poisoning my professional reputation before I even knew I was under attack. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. I'd spent 8 years learning every aspect of their business, building relationships with their clients, and creating the systems that made their success possible. I knew where the bodies were buried because I'd helped bury most of them. And now I knew exactly what they'd taken from me. The question was, what was I going to take from them? I needed to hit something hard. Murphy's boxing gym was exactly the kind of place that corporate executives avoided. Gritty, sweaty, and honest. I'd been going there twice a week for the past 5 years, partly for exercise and partly for the reminder that there was a world outside of conference rooms and quarterly projections. Danny Murphy, the owner, was working the heavy bag when I walked in. At 65, he could still move like a man half his age, throwing combinations that would have impressed fighters a third his age. "Jamie," he called out, pausing his workout. "You're back early? Thought you were in Paris for another week." "Change of plans?" I said, wrapping my hands. "Got fired yesterday." "Fired? What the hell for?" "Taking a vacation." I started working the speed bag, letting the rhythm calm my racing thoughts. Apparently, my father-in-law decided 8 years of service wasn't worth a week in France. Danny shook his head. "Family business? Family business. Those are the worst. Family thinks they own you just because you married into it." He paused. "What are you going to do?" "Still figuring that out." I moved to the heavy bag and started throwing punches, putting my full weight behind each one. Left jab, right cross, left hook. The familiar routine helped organize my thoughts. Celeste and Evan thought they were so clever. They'd planned this whole thing like a corporate merger, with timelines and contingencies and risk management. But they'd forgotten something important. I wasn't just another business obstacle to be managed. I was a fighter. "You're hitting harder than usual," Danny observed. "Something else going on?" I told him about the evidence I'd found, about Celeste's affair, about the systematic destruction of my professional life. Danny listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or grunting in understanding. "So what's your move?" he asked when I finished. "I'm not sure yet, but I know one thing. They want me to disappear quietly, to just accept what they've done and move on. That's not happening." "Good. Man's got to stand up for himself." Danny grabbed a towel and wiped the sweat from his face. "But be smart about it. Angry men make stupid mistakes." "I'm not angry," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "I'm focused." That evening, I sat in my empty condo with a legal pad, making lists. Everything I knew about Driscoll and Associates' vulnerabilities, every questionable business practice I'd witnessed or participated in, every client relationship that depended on my personal connections rather than company loyalty. The picture that emerged was interesting. Celeste and Chaz had been so focused on removing me from the equation that they hadn't considered what my absence would actually mean for the company's operations. 3 of their biggest clients had personal relationships with me that went back years. The automated systems that managed their supply chain logistics were programs I designed and implemented, programs that required regular maintenance and updates that only I fully understood. The cost-cutting measures that had improved their profit margins over the past 2 years were all based on operational changes I'd developed. They'd fired their most valuable employee to clear the way for a merger with their biggest competitor. It was either brilliant or catastrophically stupid, and I was betting on stupid. My phone rang, interrupting my planning. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Jamie Rourke, I answered. Mr. Rourke, this is Sarah Chen from Pinnacle Industries. I hope I'm not calling too late. Pinnacle Industries was one of Driscoll and Associates' largest clients, representing about 15% of their annual revenue. Sarah was their operations director, and we'd worked closely together on several major projects. Not at all, Sarah. What can I do for you? I just heard about your departure from Driscoll and Associates. I wanted to reach out personally because, frankly, you've been the main reason our partnership with them has been so successful. I appreciate that. I'm calling because we're evaluating our logistics partnerships for next year, and your name keeps coming up in our internal discussions. Would you be interested in meeting to discuss some potential opportunities? I smiled for the first time in 2 days. I'd be very interested. Excellent. Are you available tomorrow afternoon? Say 2 o'clock at our downtown office? I'll be there. After hanging up, I added a new item to my legal pad. Client relationships. Leverage opportunities. Celeste and Evan had made their move while I was out of the country, thinking they could present me with a fait accompli. But they'd forgotten that business relationships are built on trust and performance, not corporate letterheads. I spent the rest of the evening researching Evan Marston and Titan Logistics. What I found was enlightening. Titan was larger than Driscoll and Associates, but less efficient. Their profit margins were lower, their client satisfaction scores were mediocre, and they'd been losing market share for the past 18 months. A merger with Driscoll and Associates would solve a lot of Titan's problems, if they could maintain the operational efficiency that made Driscoll competitive. But that efficiency was largely based on systems and relationships that I'd built. They'd stolen my wife and my job. Now they were about to discover what those things were actually worth. The Pinnacle Industries building was one of those modern glass towers that dominated Portland's downtown skyline. Sarah Chen's office was on the 32nd floor, with a view that stretched from Mount Hood to the Pacific Ocean. Jamie, thanks for coming on such short notice, Sarah said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. Coffee? Please. She poured 2 cups from an expensive-looking machine and handed me one. I'll cut right to the chase. Pinnacle is growing faster than we anticipated, and our current logistics partnerships aren't keeping up. We need someone who understands both the technical and strategic aspects of supply chain management. What kind of volume are we talking about? Double our current capacity over the next 18 months. We're expanding into 3 new markets, and we need a logistics partner who can scale with us. I did the math quickly. Double Pinnacle's current volume would represent about 30% of Driscoll and Associates' total business. Losing that contract would be devastating for them. That's ambitious, I said. What's your timeline? We need to make a decision by the end of next month. Our current contract with Driscoll expires in January, and we want to have everything in place for a smooth transition. Have you discussed the expansion with Driscoll? Sarah's expression tightened slightly. We tried, but frankly, the response we got wasn't encouraging. Charles Driscoll seemed more interested in explaining why it couldn't be done than in figuring out how to make it work. And Celeste, she paused diplomatically. Let's just say her presentation focused more on marketing concepts than operational realities. I see. The truth is, Jamie, you were the reason we felt confident in Driscoll's ability to handle our business. Without you there, she shrugged. We need to explore other options. What kind of other options? Well, that depends. Are you planning to stay in the logistics industry? I set down my coffee cup and leaned forward. What if I told you I was considering starting my own company? Sarah's eyes lit up. Then I'd say we should talk about what kind of partnership might be possible. We spent the next 2 hours discussing Pinnacle's expansion plans, their operational requirements, and the timeline for implementation. By the time I left, I had a preliminary proposal to develop and a potential anchor client that would make any new venture immediately viable. But more importantly, I had leverage. I drove straight from Pinnacle to the Driscoll and Associates building. This time I didn't bother trying to go upstairs. Instead, I waited in the parking garage until I saw Celeste's BMW pull in. She looked surprised to see me standing next to her parking space, but she recovered quickly. Jamie, I thought you might call. I figured a face-to-face conversation would be better. She glanced around the garage nervously. This isn't really the place. It's perfect. Private, neutral territory. We need to talk. Celeste sighed and locked her car. Fine, but make it quick. I have a meeting in 10 minutes. With Evan? Her face went pale, but she kept her voice steady. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. Evan Marston, CEO of Titan Logistics. Your business partner. Your lover. The man you've been planning to merge with while systematically destroying my reputation. Jamie. I met him in Paris, by the way. Charming guy. We had drinks, talked about the industry. He was very interested in Driscoll and Associates' operational efficiency. I can see why you're attracted to him. Celeste's composure was starting to crack. You don't understand the situation. I understand it perfectly. You and Daddy decided that I was expendable, so you found a replacement. Someone who could give you access to a larger company while eliminating your biggest competitor. It's actually pretty smart, from a business perspective. Then why are we having this conversation? I smiled. Because you made one small mistake. You assumed I'd just disappear quietly. What do you want, Jamie? I want you to understand something. I built the systems that make your company profitable. I developed the client relationships that generate your revenue. I created the operational efficiency that makes you competitive. And all of that walks out the door with me. We'll manage. Will you? I just came from a meeting with Sarah Chen at Pinnacle Industries. Interesting conversation. They're expanding, looking for a new logistics partner. Someone who understands their business. Someone they trust. The color drained from Celeste's face. You can't what? Can't compete with my former employer. Can't leverage the relationships I built over 8 years. Can't start my own company using the knowledge and experience I gained working for your family. There are non-compete clauses written by your sister Becca, who never quite understood the difference between enforceable and intimidating. I've had them reviewed. They're mostly worthless. Celeste was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. What do you want? I want you to know that this isn't over. You and Evan thought you could just erase me from your lives, but you forgot something important. I know where all the bodies are buried, and I'm very good at digging. I turned to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Celeste, you might want to let Evan know that his operational efficiency assumptions are about to be tested. I'd hate for him to make any decisions based on incomplete information. I left her standing in the parking garage, probably calling Evan before I even reached my car. Let them panic. Let them scramble to figure out how much damage I could actually do. They were about to find out. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my new office, a modest space in a converted warehouse that I'd leased with my severance money, when my former friend Marcus Webb called. Marcus and I had been close since college. He'd been the best man at my wedding, and I'd been the godfather to his daughter. He worked in business development at a mid-sized logistics company, and we'd referred clients to each other for years. Jamie, we need to talk, he said without preamble. Sure, what's up? Not over the phone. Can you meet me at Brennan's tonight? 8 o'clock? Brennan's was a bar downtown where Marcus and I used to grab drinks after work. The urgency in his voice was concerning, but I agreed to meet him. I arrived early and claimed a table in the back corner, away from the crowd. Marcus showed up 15 minutes late, looking uncomfortable and avoiding eye contact. Thanks for coming, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. No problem. You sounded stressed on the phone. Marcus ordered a whiskey, which was unusual for him. He was normally a beer guy. Jamie, I'm going to be direct because I respect our friendship too much to dance around this. Okay. I've been hearing things about you, about what happened at Driscoll and Associates, about why you were really fired. I kept my expression neutral. What kind of things? That you were skimming money from client accounts? That you were drinking on the job? That you threatened Celeste when she confronted you about it? The accusations hit like physical blows. I'd known Celeste was spreading rumors, but hearing them from Marcus made them real in a way that corporate gossip hadn't. And you believe that? I don't know what to believe. The Marcus I know would never do those things, but... He paused, taking a long sip of his whiskey. People are saying you've been acting erratically since the divorce, that you're trying to sabotage Driscoll and Associates out of spite. What people? Industry people. Clients. Competitors. He met my eyes for the first time since sitting down. Evan Marston called me personally to warn me about you. Said you'd been making threats, trying to steal proprietary information. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Evan Marston. Of course. Jamie, I've known you for 15 years. If this is all BS, just tell me. But if there's even a grain of truth to it, you'll what? Cut ties with me? Stop taking my calls? Warn other people in the industry to stay away from the unstable ex-husband? Marcus's silence was answer enough. I leaned back in the booth, studying my oldest friend's face. The doubt in his eyes was genuine, which made it worse than if he'd simply been lying. Celeste and Evan hadn't just spread rumors. They'd crafted a narrative that was believable enough to turn my friends against me. Let me ask you something, Marcus. In the 15 years you've known me, have I ever stolen anything? Have I ever threatened anyone? Have I ever done anything that would make you question my character? No, but you are willing to believe I started now? Because Evan Marston, a man you've never met before, told you I'm dangerous? It's not just him. Celeste confirmed Celeste is sleeping with him. The words came out harder than I'd intended, and Marcus flinched. She's been having an affair with Evan Marston for months. They planned my termination together, and now they're planning a merger between their companies. Everything she's told you is designed to discredit me before I can interfere with their plans. Marcus stared at me for a long moment. Can you prove that? I could. I had emails, calendar entries, voice memos. But sharing them would mean admitting that I'd accessed Celeste's private files without permission, which would only reinforce the narrative that I was unethical. Would it matter if I could? You've already decided what you believe. That's not fair, isn't it? I stood up, throwing a 20 on the table for my untouched beer. 15 years of friendship, and it takes one phone call from a stranger to make you doubt me. That tells me everything I need to know about what our relationship was really worth. Jamie, wait, but I was already walking away. Behind me, I could hear Marcus calling my name, but I didn't turn around. There was nothing left to say. Outside, I sat in my car for 10 minutes, processing what had just happened. This wasn't just about Marcus. If Evan and Celeste had reached out to him, they'd reached out to others. My entire professional network was being systematically poisoned against me. It was a smart strategy. Isolate me from potential allies, discredit me with potential clients, and make it impossible for me to compete effectively. By the time I realized what was happening, it would be too late to counter it. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated how angry their tactics would make me. I'd been planning to compete with them professionally, to build something better than what they'd stolen from me. But this was personal now. They hadn't just taken my job and my wife, they were taking my reputation, my friendships, my entire professional identity. If they wanted to play dirty, I was ready to get my hands filthy. I spent the next week reaching out to everyone in my professional network, testing the waters to see how far the poison had spread. The results were depressing but enlightening. About half the people I called didn't return my messages. Of those who did, most were polite but distant, clearly uncomfortable with whatever they'd heard about me. A few were more direct, expressing concern about my recent behavior, and suggesting I might want to take some time to get my head straight. But a few, maybe 10%, were skeptical of the rumors. These were people who'd worked with me closely enough to know that the accusations didn't match the person they knew. More importantly, they were people who had their own reasons to distrust Celeste and Chaz Driscoll. I started keeping a list: allies, enemies, and neutrals. The allies were outnumbered, but they were strategically positioned. Sarah Chen at Pinnacle Industries, Tom Rodriguez at Pacific Freight, Jennifer Walsh at Northwest Distribution. People who cared more about results than gossip. The enemies were more numerous, but less cohesive. They believed the rumors because it was easier than investigating them, or because they had their own reasons to prefer Driscoll and Associates over a potential competitor. The neutrals were the wild card. They could be swayed either way, depending on how events unfolded over the next few months. I was analyzing my lists when my phone rang. The caller ID showed blocked number. Jamie Rourke, Mr. Rourke, this is Detective Lisa Park with the Portland Police Bureau. I'd like to speak with you about a complaint we've received. My blood went cold. What kind of complaint? Maltreatment and stalking. Could you come down to the station this afternoon, say 3 o'clock? Am I being charged with something? Not at this time. We just want to hear your side of the story. I agreed to meet her and spent the next 2 hours consulting with a lawyer. David Kim was a criminal defense attorney I'd met through business networking events. He was expensive, but he was good. Don't volunteer any information, he advised. Answer their questions directly, but don't elaborate. And if they start treating you like a suspect instead of a witness, we stop talking immediately. Detective Park was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made me think she'd seen through her share of lies. She led me to an interview room and offered me coffee, which I declined. Mr. Rourke, we've received a complaint from Celeste Driscoll alleging that you've been following her, making threatening phone calls, and attempting to access her workplace without authorization. That's not accurate. Which part? Any of it. I spoke with Celeste once in a public parking garage about our divorce. I haven't called her at all, and I haven't attempted to access any workplace. I was banned from the Driscoll and Associates building the day I returned from vacation. Detective Park made notes in a small notebook. Mrs. Driscoll says you've been parked outside her apartment building on multiple occasions. I've never been to her apartment building. I don't even know where she lives now. She also says you threatened to destroy her life during your conversation in the parking garage. I thought back to that conversation, trying to remember my exact words. I told her that I knew about her affair and that I wasn't going to disappear quietly. I may have mentioned that I was planning to compete with her company, but I didn't threaten to destroy anything. So you admit to confronting her about an affair? I admit to discussing the reasons for our divorce? Yes. Detective Park studied my face for a moment. Mr. Rourke, I'm going to be straight with you. These kinds of complaints are usually he said, she said situations. Without evidence of actual criminal behavior, there's not much we can do. But I want you to understand that we're taking this seriously. I understand. I'm going to recommend that you avoid any contact with Mrs. Driscoll going forward. No phone calls, no text messages, no showing up at places where she might be. Can you agree to that? Absolutely. Good. If we receive any more complaints, we'll have to investigate more aggressively. I'm sure you understand. I left the police station feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Celeste wasn't just spreading rumors. She was trying to get me arrested. The maltreatment complaint was clearly false, but it served multiple purposes. It made me look unstable. It created a legal paper trail that supported her narrative, and it put me on the defensive. But it also told me something important. She was scared. People don't file false police reports unless they feel threatened. And if Celeste felt threatened, it meant my counterattack was working. That evening, I called Sarah Chen at Pinnacle Industries. Sarah, it's Jamie Rourke. I wanted to give you an update on the proposal we discussed. Perfect timing. I was just reviewing your preliminary numbers. They're impressive, but I have to ask, are you confident you can deliver on these timelines without the infrastructure that Driscoll and Associates has? More confident than I would be with their infrastructure. I designed most of their systems myself, and I know their limitations. What I'm proposing is more efficient and more scalable. That's what I was hoping to hear. When can we see a detailed implementation plan? 2 weeks. But Sarah, I need to give you a heads up about something. Celeste Driscoll has been spreading some pretty serious accusations about me in the industry. You might hear things that don't match your experience working with me. There was a pause. What kind of accusations? Financial impropriety, threatening behavior, that sort of thing. All false, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. I appreciate the honesty. Jamie, I've worked with you for 3 years. If someone tells me you're a threat, I'm going to consider the source. Thank you. Besides, we're more interested in results than gossip. Get me that implementation plan and let's see what you can do. After hanging up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. Celeste and Evan could spread all the rumors they wanted, but at the end of the day, business was about performance. And I was very good at performing. They'd started this war thinking they could destroy me with whisper campaigns and false accusations. They were about to learn that I fought back with results. 2 months after my termination, I was working late in my new office when I got a call from an unexpected source. Becca Driscoll, Celeste's younger sister, and the family lawyer. Jamie, I hope I'm not calling too late. Not at all. What can I do for you, Becca? There was a long pause. I need to see you. Tonight, if possible. There's something you need to know. About what? About Celeste? About what's really happening at the company? Can you meet me at the Coffee Bean on 23rd? The one that stays open late? I agreed and drove across town, wondering what could possibly motivate Becca to reach out. She'd always been the most reasonable member of the Driscoll family, but she was also fiercely loyal to them. For her to contact me meant something significant had happened. I found her in a corner booth, looking nervous and exhausted. She'd ordered coffee but hadn't touched it. Thanks for coming, she said as I sat down. What's going on, Becca? She took a deep breath. I found out about the merger, the real merger. Between Driscoll and Associates and Titan Logistics? That's not exactly a secret. No, not that merger. The other one. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. Jamie, they're not merging the companies. Evan is buying us out. Dad doesn't know yet, but I've seen the paperwork. Once the deal closes, Driscoll and Associates will cease to exist. Everyone will be terminated except for Celeste, who will get a VP position at Titan. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. What about Chaz? What about the family legacy? Dad thinks he's going to be co-CEO of the merged company. He has no idea that Evan has been planning to push him out from day one. Becca's hands were shaking slightly. Jamie, they're going to destroy everything my grandfather built, and they're using my legal work to do it. Why are you telling me this? Because I helped them fire you. I wrote the termination letter, I reviewed the non-compete clauses, I even helped draft the maltreatment complaint. She looked miserable. I thought you were the problem. I thought removing you would help the company. But now I realize you were the only thing holding us together. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. Becca had always been straightforward, sometimes brutally so. The guilt in her expression seemed genuine. What do you want me to do about it? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe there's nothing anyone can do at this point. She finally took a sip of her coffee, making a face at how cold it had gotten. But I thought you deserved to know the truth. When is this supposed to happen? The preliminary agreement is already signed. Full acquisition closes in 6 weeks, assuming due diligence doesn't reveal any major problems. 6 weeks. I thought about what that meant for my own plans. Pinnacle Industries was still evaluating my proposal, but they were also still under contract with Driscoll and Associates until January. If the company was sold to Titan Logistics, that contract would transfer to Evan's control. Becca, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. The rumors about me, the financial impropriety, the threatening behavior, how much of that came from Celeste and how much came from Evan? She was quiet for a long moment. Most of it came from Evan. He had a whole dossier prepared before you even got back from Paris. Celeste just went along with it. A dossier? Background research, psychological profiling, strategic recommendations for marginalizing you in the industry. It was incredibly thorough. She paused. Jamie, this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. Evan has been planning this for months, maybe longer. I felt a cold fury building in my chest. This wasn't just about an affair or a business merger. This was a calculated destruction of my life, planned and executed with military precision while I was completely unaware of what was happening. There's something else, Becca continued. Evan has been reaching out to your potential clients, warning them about you. He's been very systematic about it. How do you know? I've been helping with the legal review of the merger documents. Part of Evan's justification for the acquisition price is that he's already neutralized the competitive threat you represent. He has documentation of every conversation, every warning he's given about you. The scope of it was breathtaking. While I'd been focused on building a new business, Evan had been systematically destroying the foundation I needed to build it on. He'd been 3 steps ahead of me from the beginning, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd told Becca about it, and Becca, despite her loyalty to the family, had a conscience. Why are you really telling me this? I asked. Because I think you're the only person who can stop it. Stop what? The merger? Your sister's affair? Evan's manipulation? All of it. She met my eyes directly. Jamie, you know our business better than anyone. You know our clients, our systems, our vulnerabilities. If anyone can find a way to derail this deal, it's you. And why would I want to help the family that just spent 3 months destroying my reputation? Because if you don't, Evan wins everything. Your job, your wife, your industry reputation, and the company you helped build. Is that really how you want this to end? I thought about it for a moment. She was right, of course. Letting Evan complete his acquisition would validate everything he'd done to me. It would prove that his strategy had been correct, that I really was as powerless as he'd assumed. But stopping him would require more than just business competition. It would require me to get personal, to fight as dirty as he had, to abandon any pretense of taking the high road. If I were to hypothetically try to stop this, I said carefully, what kind of timeline would I be looking at? The due diligence period ends in 4 weeks. After that, the deal is essentially unstoppable. Becca slid a manila envelope across the table. Everything you need to know is in there. Financial statements, merger documents, client lists, operational assessments. I picked up the envelope but didn't open it. This could get you in serious trouble. I know, but I'd rather be in trouble for doing the right thing than successful for doing the wrong thing. I left the coffee shop with more information than I'd had in months and a decision to make. I could take the high road, focus on building my own business, and let the Driscoll family reap what they'd sown. Or I could take everything Becca had given me and use it to destroy Evan's carefully laid plans. It wasn't really a choice at all. I spent the weekend studying Becca's documents, and what I found was both infuriating and illuminating. Evan's plan was brilliant in its simplicity and ruthless in its execution. The financial terms of the merger were heavily weighted in Titan Logistics' favor. Driscoll and Associates would be valued at roughly 60% of its actual worth, with the justification being operational uncertainties and management instabilities, code words for my departure and the chaos that followed. But the real genius was in the client retention strategy. Evan had been quietly reaching out to Driscoll's major clients for months, not to steal them directly, but to plant seeds of doubt about the company's stability. When the merger was announced, those same clients would see Titan's acquisition as a solution to their concerns rather than a hostile takeover. The timeline was tight but manageable. Due diligence would be completed in 4 weeks, with the final closing scheduled for the week before Christmas. By New Year's Day, Driscoll and Associates would be history, and Evan would control both companies' client bases. Unless I stopped him. I started with the financials. Becca's documents included internal financial statements that painted a very different picture than what Titan's due diligence team was seeing. Driscoll and Associates was actually more profitable than the official reports suggested, thanks to some creative accounting that Chaz had been using to minimize tax liability. More importantly, the company's operational efficiency, the main selling point for the merger, was entirely dependent on systems and relationships that I'd developed. Without me, those systems were already starting to break down. I spent Monday morning making phone calls to key clients, not to steal their business, but to ask pointed questions about their satisfaction with Driscoll's recent performance. What I heard confirmed my suspicions. Service quality had declined noticeably since my departure. Sarah Chen at Pinnacle Industries was particularly blunt. "Jamie, I don't know what's happening over there, but our last 3 shipments have been delayed, and when I call for updates, I get transferred around to people who don't seem to know what's going on." Similar stories from other clients painted a picture of a company in operational decline. The question was whether Evan's due diligence team was seeing the same thing, or whether they were being shown sanitized reports that hid the problems. I decided to find out. That afternoon, I drove to the Driscoll and Associates building and parked across the street. I wasn't violating Detective Park's warning about avoiding Celeste. I was conducting legitimate business research in a public space. At 3:30, I saw what I was looking for. 2 men in expensive suits leaving the building, carrying briefcases and looking like they'd just finished a long meeting. Due diligence team, almost certainly. I followed them to a nearby restaurant where they met with a third man who could only be Evan Marston. Even from across the restaurant, I could see the confidence in his body language, the satisfied smile of someone whose plans were proceeding exactly as expected. I took a seat at the bar where I could observe their conversation without being obvious about it. They were too far away for me to hear specific words, but their gestures and expressions told the story. The due diligence was going well, the numbers looked good, and the deal was on track. That's when I noticed something interesting. One of the due diligence team members was taking notes on a tablet, and from my angle at the bar, I could see part of his screen. He was documenting client satisfaction scores, operational efficiency metrics, and financial projections, all of which were significantly more optimistic than the reality I'd been hearing about from actual clients. Someone was feeding Evan's team false information. The question was whether it was intentional deception or simply incompetence. I finished my drink and left before they did, but I'd seen enough. Evan was making his acquisition decision based on incomplete and possibly false data. If I could expose the real operational situation before the deal closed, I might be able to derail the entire merger. But I needed help, and I knew exactly who to call. That evening, I met with Tom Rodriguez from Pacific Freight at a sports bar downtown. Tom was one of the few industry contacts who'd remained openly supportive after my termination, partly because he'd never liked Chaz Driscoll, and partly because he'd worked with me long enough to know the rumors about me were false. Jamie, good to see you, Tom said, shaking my hand. How's the new business coming along? Slowly but steadily. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I ordered a beer and leaned in closer. Tom, what would you say if I told you that Driscoll & Associates is about to be acquired by Titan Logistics? I'd say it makes sense. Chaz has been looking for an exit strategy for years, and Celeste doesn't have the operational experience to run the company long term. What if I told you that the acquisition is based on false operational data, and that the merged company is going to be a disaster for existing clients? Tom's expression grew more serious. I'd say you have my attention. I spent the next hour explaining what I'd learned from Becca's documents and my own research. Tom listened carefully, asking pointed questions about the financial projections and operational assumptions underlying the merger. So what are you proposing? He asked when I finished. I'm proposing that we give Titan's due diligence team access to some real data about Driscoll's current operational performance. Anonymous client feedback, service quality metrics, that sort of thing. That's a pretty aggressive move, Jamie. You sure you want to go down that road? I thought about Evan's systematic destruction of my reputation, about Marcus's doubt, about the false police report. Tom, they declared war on me 3 months ago. I'm just finally deciding to fight back. Tom nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Client contacts, people who've been having problems with Driscoll's service since I left, people who might be willing to share their honest opinions with some very interested listeners. I can make some calls. Good. But Tom, this has to be completely legitimate. Real clients, real problems, real feedback. I'm not interested in manufacturing false evidence. Understood. When do you need this? As soon as possible. The due diligence period ends in 3 weeks. We shook hands, and I left the bar feeling like I finally had a plan that might actually work. Evan had been playing chess while I'd been playing checkers, but the game wasn't over yet. It was time to flip the board. The next 2 weeks were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and careful coordination. Tom Rodriguez proved to be an invaluable ally, connecting me with clients who'd been frustrated with Driscoll & Associates' declining service quality, but hadn't known how to voice their concerns effectively. The strategy was simple. Make sure Titan's due diligence team heard from real clients about real problems. No lies, no manufactured evidence, just honest feedback from people who'd been directly affected by my departure from the company. Sarah Chen at Pinnacle Industries was the first to make contact. She called Titan's due diligence hotline and provided detailed feedback about service delays, communication breakdowns, and operational inefficiencies she'd experienced over the past 3 months. I wanted to make sure you understood the operational challenges that Driscoll & Associates has been facing recently, she told them. As someone who's been evaluating whether to renew our contract, I thought you should have the complete picture. Other clients followed suit. Pacific Northwest Distribution reported billing errors and missed delivery windows. Cascade Manufacturing complained about lack of responsiveness from account management. Northwest Freight detailed system failures and communication breakdowns. Each call was legitimate, each complaint was documented, and each conversation was recorded by Titan's due diligence team as part of their standard process. By the end of the second week, I could see the effects. Evan's confidence was starting to crack. I observed him from a distance at industry events, noting the tension in his posture, the forced nature of his smiles. The due diligence that was supposed to be a formality was turning into a real investigation. But Evan wasn't passive. He started fighting back, reaching out to clients directly to clarify any concerns they might have raised. He offered special incentives for contract renewals, promised operational improvements, and generally tried to manage the damage. That's when I played my trump card. I called Detective Lisa Park at the Portland Police Bureau. Detective Park, this is Jamie Rourke. We spoke a few months ago about a maltreatment complaint. Mr. Rourke, what can I do for you? I wanted to report some new information that might be relevant to that case. I've discovered evidence that the original complaint may have been part of a larger pattern of false accusations designed to interfere with my business activities. What kind of evidence? Documentation showing that the complainant and her business partner have been systematically spreading false information about me to clients and industry contacts. I believe the maltreatment complaint was filed to support this disinformation campaign. That's a serious allegation, Mr. Rourke. Do you have proof? I have emails, recorded phone calls, and witness statements. I'd like to file a counter complaint for defamation and filing a false police report. There was a pause. Mr. Rourke, I need to be clear about something. Filing a false police report is a felony. Are you certain you want to pursue this? I'm certain. All right, can you come in tomorrow morning to file a formal complaint? I spent that evening organizing my evidence with David Kim, my lawyer. We had enough to make a credible case for defamation, and the false police report charge was supported by documented evidence that Celeste's accusations were part of a coordinated business strategy rather than genuine safety concerns. This is going to get ugly, David warned me. Once you file this complaint, there's no going back. Celeste and Evan will fight back hard. Good, I said. I'm tired of being the only one playing defense. The next morning, I filed formal complaints against both Celeste and Evan for defamation, conspiracy to interfere with business relationships, and filing false police reports. The charges were serious enough to warrant investigation, and the timing couldn't have been worse for their merger plans. Within hours, word of the criminal complaints had reached Titan's corporate headquarters. I knew this because Tom Rodriguez called me that afternoon with an update. Jamie, I just heard from a contact at Titan. Their legal department is putting the merger on hold pending resolution of the criminal charges. They can't risk acquiring a company that's involved in active litigation with potential criminal exposure. It was exactly what I'd hoped for. Evan's carefully planned timeline was falling apart, and the due diligence problems were now compounded by legal complications that could drag on for months. But Evan wasn't finished. That evening, I got a call from Marcus Webb. Jamie, what the hell are you doing? I'm defending myself against false accusations. Why? Evan Marston called me today. He says you're trying to destroy innocent people out of spite, that you're filing false criminal charges to interfere with legitimate business activities. I felt a familiar anger rising in my chest. And you believe him? I don't know what to believe anymore. But Jamie, if you're doing this just to get revenge... Marcus, let me ask you something. When Evan called you 3 months ago to warn you about me, did he mention that he was sleeping with my wife? Did he mention that they'd been planning my termination for months? Did he mention that he'd been systematically spreading false rumors about me throughout the industry? There was silence on the other end of the line. Because all of that is documented, Marcus. I have emails, voice recordings, and witness statements. The criminal charges aren't revenge. They're justice. Jesus, Jamie, I had no idea. No, you didn't. Because you chose to believe a stranger instead of trusting 15 years of friendship. I paused, letting that sink in. But it's not too late to do the right thing. What do you mean? I mean, you can help me prove what really happened. You can provide a statement about the false information Evan gave you about me. You can help expose the truth. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. If I do this, it'll destroy my relationship with Titan. Evan will make sure I never work with them again. And if you don't do this, you'll be complicit in everything they've done to me. Another long pause. Send me the documentation. Let me see what you have. I'll email it tonight. After hanging up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope that justice might actually be possible. Evan had built his strategy on lies and manipulation, but lies have a way of collapsing when exposed to scrutiny. The question was whether I could expose enough of the truth before he found a way to salvage his plans. The criminal investigation moved faster than I'd expected. Detective Park was thorough, interviewing witnesses, reviewing documentation, and building a case that painted a clear picture of coordinated defamation and false reporting. Marcus Webb provided a crucial statement detailing the false information Evan had given him about me. Other industry contacts came forward with similar stories, creating a pattern of deliberate misinformation that was impossible to dismiss as coincidence. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Chaz Driscoll himself. 2 days before Titan's board was scheduled to vote on the merger, Chaz called me directly. Jamie, we need to talk. I'm listening, not over the phone. Meet me at my office tonight, after hours. There's something you need to see. I arrived at the Driscoll & Associates building at 8 o'clock. Tony, the security guard, let me up, looking confused but following Chaz's instructions. I found him in his corner office, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. Jamie, sit down. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. I owe you an apology. For what specifically? For everything. For firing you. For believing Celeste's version of events. For not seeing what was really happening. He opened a folder on his desk and slid it toward me. I found these in Celeste's office this morning. The folder contained printed emails between Celeste and Evan dating back 8 months. The correspondence detailed not just their affair, but their complete strategy for removing me from the company and positioning Driscoll and Associates for acquisition. One email, dated 2 weeks before my Paris vacation, was particularly damning. Everything is proceeding according to plan. Jamie suspects nothing, and his vacation gives us the perfect opportunity to complete the transition. By the time he returns, the termination will be a fait accompli, and the acquisition negotiations can begin in earnest. Your operational assessment of the company is accurate. Without Jamie's systems and client relationships, we'll need Titan's infrastructure to maintain competitiveness. The merger isn't just an opportunity, it's a necessity. She played me, Chaz said quietly. My own daughter played me like a fool. What changed your mind? The criminal investigation. When Detective Park interviewed me yesterday, she showed me evidence that I'd never seen before. Voice recordings, email threads, documentation of the systematic campaign against you. He looked up at me with something that might have been respect. You were right about everything. What are you going to do about it? I'm withdrawing from the merger tonight. Titan's board vote is tomorrow morning, but there won't be anything to vote on. I studied his face, looking for signs of deception. Chaz had always been a pragmatist, capable of changing course when circumstances required it. But this felt like more than just business pragmatism. Why? I asked. Because I built this company, and I'm not going to let my daughter and her lover destroy it for their own gain, he paused. And because I treated you badly, and I want to make it right. What does that mean specifically? It means I'm offering you your job back. Full reinstatement, back pay, and a 20% equity stake in the company. He slid a contract across the desk. I need someone I can trust to help rebuild what we've lost. I picked up the contract, but didn't read it immediately. What about Celeste? Celeste is terminated, effective immediately. She'll be facing criminal charges, and I won't have someone I can't trust in a leadership position. And Evan? Evan will be dealing with his own problems. When I withdraw from the merger tomorrow, Titan's stock price is going to take a hit. Their board isn't going to be happy with the CEO who promised them an acquisition that fell apart due to criminal investigations. I read through the contract carefully. It was everything Chaz had promised, plus some additional terms I hadn't expected. Operational autonomy, client relationship control, and a clear succession plan that would give me a path to eventual ownership. This is generous, I said. It's fair. You built most of what's valuable about this company. You should own part of it. I thought about everything that had happened over the past 4 months. The betrayal, the false accusations, the systematic destruction of my reputation. Part of me wanted to reject Chaz's offer and continue building my own company, proving that I didn't need the Driscoll family to succeed. But another part of me recognized the opportunity for something more satisfying than just success, complete vindication. I'll take the job, I said, but I have some conditions. Name them. First, I want a public statement acknowledging that the accusations against me were false and that my termination was unjustified. Done. Second, I want operational control over the client retention campaign. We're going to lose some accounts because of the instability, and I want to be the one who wins them back. Agreed. Third, I want Celeste banned from the building and from any involvement in company operations, even after the criminal charges are resolved. Chaz's expression tightened, but he nodded. She's my daughter, Jamie, but she's also a criminal. I won't protect her from the consequences of her actions. We shook hands and I signed the contract. 4 months after being fired for taking a vacation, I was back where I'd started, except now I owned part of the company and had complete operational control. But more importantly, I'd proven something to myself and to everyone who doubted me, that the truth has a way of winning, even when it's buried under layers of lies and manipulation. The next morning, I sat in my restored office, reading news reports about Titan Logistics' collapsed acquisition plans, and Evan Marstein's sudden resignation as CEO. The criminal charges against both him and Celeste were front-page news in the business section, along with speculation about the long-term damage to both companies' reputations. My phone rang. It was Sarah Chen from Pinnacle Industries. Jamie, I just saw the news. Congratulations on your reinstatement. Thank you, Sarah. I'm looking forward to rebuilding our partnership. Actually, that's why I'm calling. Our board met yesterday and we've decided to expand our contract with Driscoll and Associates. We want to move forward with the growth plan we discussed, but under your operational leadership. I'd be delighted to make that happen. After hanging up, I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the city skyline. 4 months ago, I'd been sitting in a Paris bar, toasting with the man who was destroying my life. Today, that man was facing criminal charges and professional ruin while I was stronger and more successful than I'd ever been. Evan and Celeste had tried to erase me from their lives, but they'd forgotten something important. I was very good at what I did, and I didn't give up easily. They'd wanted me out of office. Instead, they'd given me the keys to the entire building. Justice, it turned out, was even more satisfying than revenge.